We were girls in our teens. We were still maturing. At that age, our hormones were still evolving. Thus, it appeared to be the type of rock alliance that fans believed would endure forever. Years later, however, Lita Ford has the courage to come clean. There was a hint of hurt and disbelief in her voice. She recalls the early days when she, the fiery hard rock queen and heavy metal's wild prince, Ozzy Osbourne, shared the stage and dove headfirst into the music industry's pandemonium. Together, they went on tours, drank till dawn, and took in the most unadulterated, raw experiences music has to offer. However, Lita claims that a darkness was encroaching behind the flashbulbs and the thunderous clapping. A gloom that seemed to follow Ozzy everywhere he went, spawned by egos colliding, erratic outbursts, and a volatile storm. What the outside world perceived as an unbreakable link was actually a brittle bond that was breaking beneath the weight of treachery. Terrifying mood swings and heart-stopping scenes that left even the most seasoned rock fans speechless. This was more than a strained friendship. Lita says she will always remember the slow-motion descent into anarchy. Trouble was nothing new to Ozzy Osbourne. He was almost its embodiment. He was plagued by a never-ending maelstrom of controversies long before the disputes with Lita became public knowledge. These problems followed him like a shadow he could never escape. Imagine drunken outbursts that grew violent in front of shocked onlookers, screaming bouts that overflowed into the streets, and rampages that concluded with destroyed dressing rooms. Backstage conflicts frequently broke out suddenly, sometimes due to little slights, and other times to long simmering animosities. Managers and promoters left mid-negotiation, grumbling that Ozzy was just too erratic to handle. And business deals fell apart due to paranoia and mistrust. There was more to his reputation for mayhem than mere rock and roll legend. It was a fact of life. Ozzy had already blazed a trail through the music industry by the time his arguments with Lita started, leaving behind ruined friendships, betrayed collaborators, and iconic bands. He was previously idolized by musicians who vowed never to perform with him again. Others subtly acknowledged that while they appreciated his brilliance, they were afraid of the potential consequences of becoming too close. No amount of apology or forgiveness could completely erase the path of shattered bridges, resentful adversaries, and a turbulent legacy left in Ozzy's aftermath. Lita Ford entered Ozzy's universe by walking right into the middle of a hurricane rather than merely joining a band. Their arguments went beyond simple differences about set selections or riffs. They were intensely personal, passionate, and unvarnished. Ozzy's erratic energy may quickly go from exhilarating to disastrous on stage. The songs were written by him. On the songs, he sung. He sent this guy he was working with the songs. Lita would have to keep the show together because he would miss cues, switch songs in the middle of the performance, or go on strange tirades. Offstage, the man who might be amiably charming over a drink could suddenly become enraged and start destroying furniture or leaving rehearsals in a matter of minutes. Arguments frequently erupted into full-fledged shouting battles that echoed through backstage hallways and dressing rooms, igniting like gunpowder. Knowing that remarks may easily turn into lethal outbursts in Ozzy's universe, crew members learned to disperse when voices escalated. The atmosphere was tense as rehearsals frequently ended with doors slamming and instruments left unattended in the middle of songs. Lita became more aware of the darker undercurrents, Ozzy's unpredictable mood swings, his brewing resentments, and how his self-destructive impulses permeated every interaction around him. The more she was drawn into his orbit, the toll it had on her wasn't the only thing. Everyone in his circle, from Royce to close friends, was exhausted by the ripple effect, which made the whole atmosphere seem like it might blow up at any second. Ozzy's disputes with Lita weren't the only ones. Not at all. He appeared to be pulled to discord almost magnetically, and no circle was exempt. He fought for years with Black Sabbath for personal grievances and creative control. Bill Ward, Geezer Butler, and Tony Iommi are all scarred by verbal altercations, ruined rehearsals, and tours that were cut short by late-night disappearances. He was rumored by record producers to disappear for whole weekends prior to important recording dates, or to be so drunk that the day's work descended into mayhem. Outside of his inner group, Ozzy was involved in well-publicized arguments with other titans of metal. He notably squabbled with Iron Maiden during festival lineups, sometimes over set times, sometimes over perceived disrespect, and traded scathing jabs with Mötley Crüe's Nikki Sixx about backstage chaos. He also famously squabbled with Dave Mustaine over tour politics. His argument with Judas Priest turned into disputes over sound equipment, claims of sabotage, charges against AC/DC for stealing stage concepts, and a chilly relationship with Metallica as casual taunts turned into years of awkward avoidance. Not even musicians outside of the heavy metal scene were exempt. Blues superstars, pop singers, and punk icons all remember the sting of his rage or the annoyance of unfulfilled promises. An Australian can be amiable and kind one week, then erratic and cruel the next, apologizing with lavish displays just to rekindle the conflict later. Ozzy's route appeared to be lined by either brittle truces or bridges that had been so badly burned that they could never be restored. Private backstage spaces weren't the only places where Ozzy's fury and unpredictable nature were evident. He pushed security personnel, threw mics at photographers, and even engaged rowdy audience members directly in some well-known on-stage events. His tantrums occasionally made concerts into near misses, prompting promoters to shorten performances. Rivalries with other rock stars frequently broke out suddenly. With Ozzy exchanging private threats and public insults, festival lineups turned into battlefields that captivated the rock press for months. He publicly quarreled with colleagues like Bruce Dickinson over perceived slights, accused other musicians of sabotage, and made offensive remarks about rival bands that went beyond professional bounds. It was praised by some admirers as unadulterated defiance. Others interpreted it as yet another indication that Ozzy's career was being dangerously impacted by his psychological turmoil. Despite his intense loyalty to Sharon, their bond was unable to protect him from the enemies he created. Journalists who were in his crosshairs turned from supporters to detractors, industry execs who vowed never to collaborate with him again, and fellow headliners who refused to share a bill. Ozzy's life outside of the theater was just as tumultuous and occasionally even more sinister as his theatrical performances. His marriage to Sharon Osbourne was marred by numerous infidelity scandals, all of which made tabloid headlines. Fans were shocked by how unvarnished and unadulterated their fights could be when public altercations broke out in hotel lobby areas, backstage hallways, and even during live TV appearances. As though the relationship itself lived on disorder, there were more spectacular separations and reconciliations than the last. He has scars from his connections with his children. Deep rifts were the result of years of substance misuse and emotional instability. Even when there were intimate moments, they were frequently overwhelmed by disappointment and suspicion. Some kids separated from others for months at a time. Incapable of handling the unpredictable nature of being Ozzy's family, the spotlight of reality TV further heightened every dispute, relapse, and collapse, making personal suffering seem like puppets. Lick's show. Ozzy's the battles with drink and drugs were never ending. He would revert to his old behaviors even after making heartfelt vows to reform. He occasionally vanished for days at a time, and other times he appeared so confused that friends were afraid for his life. A somber pattern emerged from the cycle of rehabilitation, relapse, and regret. Behind closed doors, family loyalty was put to the test, financial issues erupted, and treachery and manipulation charges flew. Despite his famous reputation, his home life was just as chaotic as his travels. Unrelenting, untidy, and unavoidable. The same erratic nature that made Ozzy Osbourne a once-in-a-generation entertainer also had the capacity to quickly destroy friendships. Why was he so captivating on stage? Behind the scenes, he was also a hazardous guy to trust because of his erratic outbursts of energy and dramatic swings between genius and madness. Lita Ford's journey from devoted friend to vocal critic did not begin with a single argument. It unraveled slowly and painfully. Every fresh wound gets deeper than the one before it. She might one day experience the thrill of performing next to a rock star whose charisma could light up an auditorium. The next, she would be in a fog of anger, alcohol, and resentment, watching him ruin his own destiny. She had watched sessions collapse under the weight of his inebriated tirades, half-finished lyrics, abandoned mid-song, and engineers leaving in disgust after standing in studios where magic should have been created. Ozzy appeared unaware of the wreckage, but she had seen tours teeter on the verge of collapse due to a single careless decision, with entire crews rushing to pick up the pieces. Even his closest associates harbored anger on those nights when a small argument may turn into a full-scale conflict. It didn't end there either. With the accuracy of a knife, he would publicly criticize fellow musicians who dared to question him, lash out at promoters over postponed shows, and burn bridges with festival organizers over insignificant slights. It was unbridled mayhem. Until the distinction between the two vanished, the personal dissolved into the professional, and the professional into the personal. Ozzy's intimate battles with demons weren't kept in captivity. They permeated every transaction, every performance, and every discussion, transforming even successful moments into battlefields. Overnight, friends turned into foes. Chances fell apart in his grasp. And for those who remained in his sphere of influence, loyalty was now a risk with progressively greater odds rather than a mark of honor. Lita's frank remarks came as a shock to the public. Hearing such frank disappointment from someone who had once stood up for him astounded fans who only viewed him as the Prince of Darkness. However, it was nothing new to the veterans in his closest circle, those who had lived through the storms and saw the devastation firsthand. It was just the naked truth. Glory was never the only aspect of Ozzy Osbourne's story. Every high in the story was accompanied by a terrible